I want you to think of some of the most iconic parody movies of all time. There's a reason why the original Scary Movie is remembered fondly, while the ones that came after are considered among the worst films ever made. The later films use reference humour as a crutch. They're not a parody, they're a mile-high stack of horror tropes in a ridiculously large trench coat. Cabin in the Woods, Austin Powers, Tropic Thunder, Blazing Saddles. These films all do something in common. These films all take a look at the subject that they are satirising and deconstruct it. Austin Powers, for example, calls out the shallow portrayal of female characters in classic spy movies, as well as their heroes' questionable understanding of consent. Tropic Thunder has the one widely accepted use of blackface, because it was for the purpose of making an actual statement about the ridiculousness of some method actors. Another Crab's Treasure satirises the Souls-like genre in a lot of the same ways. However, it's clear in every detail that the developers have nothing but reverence for the genre and for From Software.
We also added Anno Londo. Fuck it.
This is present as well from the moment the game starts. The opening cutscene discusses resilience and persevering, but you can tell this is also a bit of a dig at From Software opening cutscenes. They kinda describe the world they take part in while saying practically nothing in the process.
Unstable or full of shit. But above all else, the word that best describes our world is resilient.
The first character you meet, other than the player character Krill, is the Loan Shark. Get it? Loan Shark? Intentional or not, my mind immediately went to Kingseeker Framped from Dark Souls, given the similarities in their designs. Like Kingseeker Framped as well, this guy's a bit of a dick. You enter a quick tutorial explaining combat and traversal, and here's where some of the differences are apparent. The first thing I noticed is the unlimited stamina, which I thought was bizarre, as well as the fact that your jump is quite high, and you can hold down the jump button to remain in the air even longer. All these tools provided to the player made me think that the game might be too easy. Oh, how misguided I was. After this tutorial, they basically set you free, with a castle in the distance to aim towards. You can use this area to practice around with combat as it plays a lot differently to Dark Souls. You can dodge, block and attack as usual, but you only have the one weapon. You build stagger on enemies with visible posture meters like in Lies of P or Sekiro, proving once again that Sekiro has the best Souls-like combat system. You customize your loadout by equipping different shells instead. Shells act as your shield and have a variety of statistics, but no matter what you pick, it's basically always important to have a shell on. Without a shell, you're vulnerable, now without your main defensive option of blocking, and you will die very quickly. Dodging is not nearly as viable an option as it is in Dark Souls, so instead you should typically block, at least in the early game. Partway through the game you get access to an upgrade tree which provides a wide range of useful abilities, such as having your shell automatically regenerate immediately after being destroyed, or the ability to attach a shell to the end of your fork creating a hammer which will deal more damage. Importantly, you get the ability to parry from this upgrade tree, but the way that it works is completely unique. Unlike in a game like Sekiro, instead of pressing the block button immediately before being hit, you instead hold block to stay inside your shell and release block just as you're about to be hit. It's far riskier in this sense, as a slightly off-time parry in Sekiro will still typically block most of the incoming damage. In this game, you open yourself up to taking full damage by attempting to parry. I hated this at first, it felt unwieldy and impossible to get the hang of, but by the end I actually loved it, and I think it was genius. It's really done something to differentiate itself from the Souls-like crowd. You get these upgrades from the Moon Snail, who was really funny by the way. In fact, the game is incredibly funny throughout. You can tell this game was made by an indie team. AAA developers would never do this. In a developer interview, they discussed their design philosophy in making the game. They wanted to take the Souls-like genre that is stereotypically dark and heavy and inject some colour. Create a Souls like the way Nintendo would. The juxtaposition of the dark with the light is central to the design of this game. And you get this constantly. One of the early tasks you were given is to retrieve something sufficiently beautiful from Magister in her throne room. The game is quirky and cheerful so far, even the enemies are kinda goofy looking and silly until you return to find the castle doors locked. The colours are washed out and there's this weird grimy substance all around. You sneak in and you find pollution got to them. The very trash and pollution that they treasured so much is what did them in. In a way, this is also the opposite to Dark Souls. Microplastics are the main currency in Another Crab's Treasure, and like Souls, virtually everyone is seeking them. However, while the souls feed the undead and prevent them from going hollow, microplastics hurt the living, but they don't know it. Look at this guy. If I know my Dark Souls, I'll have to battle him at some point. The NPCs you interact with through the game are fun, if a little shallow, pun intended. Kaiden acts as a kind of big sister to Krill, pushing him forward while pursuing her own goal of defeating injustice with brute strength. Conch is an elderly hermit crab historian who owns the museum and guides the player for where to go next for much of the story. Nemmer is a tough but kind merchant who will sell you stowaways for you to wear, acting similarly to Rings in Dark Souls. Firth is a straw man of an obsessive capitalist. At times, the way he's written can be a bit on the nose, like how when he discovers the worker exploitation occurring in Roland's company, he immediately and vocally defends Roland as someone who's rich couldn't possibly do anything wrong. The exaggeration is clearly intended, as that's the joke, so I don't mind it too much. It's just that at times his bootlicking is so aggressive I have a hard time seeing him, the character, and instead just see the developers hammering their point home. Once you get to the city, you can explore around a little to find out where your shell is.
Coupled with gameplay that made me feel like Spider-Man nearly every step of the way.
Eventually, once you go to the story-mandated 4 locations and none of them have your shell, you meet Pronathan, who was the loan shark from earlier that has your shell. He promises it back if you find the treasure on the map, which is incomplete, but Conch informs you of where to go to get the next piece. Only problem is that Roland and his muscle, Inkerton, want to get in your way, and he's the evil Texan billionaire tycoon, so of course he does. So you go around, hey, that's like a mimic, that's awesome. And another Dark Souls reference, hell yeah. You defeat bosses to collect map fragments, and boy are there some fun bosses. Often there will be appropriate shells lying around the boss arena, giving you options if your shell breaks, but also adding to the vibe of the fight. For example, Heikia is a samurai crab who wields a chopstick as a weapon and has sushi strewn across the arena. Another example is Grovekeeper Topoda, who has a bunch of dead crabs around him, communicating to you how dangerous he is. Once the map is complete, you go to the treasure and Roland is there already, so you must take him out in a final showdown. The final boss of this short but sweet indie game is no pushover. He tests your reflexes constantly, testing how well you can parry. In fact, he is so susceptible to parrying that it may be a reference to how you can quickly defeat Lord Gwyn in Dark Souls. Once you take him out, the treasure can be yours and you can go get your shell back.
Stupid, stupid, stupid.
I'm sick of it! Azure!
Oh, that's not good. See, Roland isn't the final boss of the game. Once you're at this point, the game enters another act. You are in the Unfathom. It is dark and it's a bad situation for everyone. Well, except you, since you can shell-port freely. They even poke fun at this. You progress, find another checkpoint to rest since this place is hell to traverse, and then you're jump scared by a boss. This is something that would be a cardinal sin in Dark Souls. You don't mess with the bonfires. But I'm okay with it here. It being a giant hermit crab living inside the shell makes sense, and the fact that when you die you're able to quickly respawn just outside the boss arena with your shell and microplastics available to pick up means that it isn't unfairly punishing. You get past this, then you see Roland and Inkerton again. Finally, the actual final showdown. They're arguing that Inkerton just shoots Roland dead right then and there like it's nothing. He's a challenging boss, the hardest up to this point by far, and once you take him down, that's all the established villains dead, so now you can return home and oh, that's not the end either. See, Conch actually reveals to you that the ocean goes deeper into the old ocean, locked behind an elevator that requires 2 hermit crabs to activate. You're introduced to the bleached crabs. These guys hit hard, and once defeated, they simply molt their shell and continue to attack you. You fight through, ignore the messages from the voice of God, and then take on King Campshire, the true final boss of the game. A giant king crab whose negligence led to the downfall of the old Carcinia, mirroring Lord Gwyn from Dark Souls. He's a difficult fight, but a great way to cap off the game. I whittle him down over many attempts before finally depleting his health bar, but then he climbs out of his shell. He has a second phase, so I try again and again and eventually besting the crab after many attempts. The game is done, thank goodness. Oh, it's still going. How many final bosses does this game have? Once at the bottom of the drain, you arrive at the perfect wall, a magical item that can fix everything. I'm not sure that's how it works, Conch. Before you can retrieve it though, Chiton shows up and kills Conch. She's brainwashed by Prayer Dubia, a godlike entity that is this game's actual final boss, and also apparently a real thing. 50 meters long? I hate that. This boss is tough. It took me hours. I had to use everything I knew, parrying, dodging, umami attacks. It would retreat whenever its stagger bar approached being full. Some people online have said that apparently it's possible to capsize it, though I didn't get close in any of my attempts, so I can't be sure. After hours of attempts and the health bar finally depleted, I had used every resource I had to beat the game. Then the second phase starts. The second phase is this almost bullet hell section where the goal is to just survive as Prayer Dubia kills itself. I am so thankful I did this on my first attempt, as I have no idea how many more attempts it would have taken for me to get there again. With the final boss defeated, Chiton lay hurt, so you must acquire the perfect wall in order to save her and...
I'll be right back!
Oh, you muscle shucker. He talks about the economy, as he usually does, before flying off to redirect the giant trash island to make everyone rich. See, that wasn't the final boss. Capitalism is. Oh well, Firth is. I knew I'd have to battle him. The man who stole the wall. That's funny. My only real gripe with the battle is that the parrying became super inconsistent when he was mid-combo, even if my timing should have been fine. He, of course, has a second phase too. That's to be expected by this point, but you take him down and take the perfect wall for yourself, destroying the trash island. That actually was the final boss now, and you've reached the end of the game. You walk through the trash city and talk to the characters you've met along the way, at least the ones who survived. Oh, don't worry, Chitin did survive her injuries. Oh look, it's Firth. Maybe he's learned his lesson now and... Ooh, that sucks. Boot liqueur. After all of this, you talk to Pronathan, and now that everyone is rich and covered in trash, surely he'll give you your shell back. He, of course, doesn't, as we'd expect from him by this point, so Krill just outright kills the man. We're done messing around. I have no idea why we couldn't have just done this hours ago, frankly, save us all the hassle. This game is a gem. I had a great time with it and would consider it the best Souls-like of the year. Well, at least so far. Another Crab's Treasure explored themes of environmentalism through its story, world design and mechanics. The fact that the shells you can collect are man-made garbage is no coincidence, and given that they are destroyed after taking a bit of damage reinforces that this garbage is unsustainable. Trash Day, as the locals call it, is when a large trash island appears above the city of New Castinia and garbage rains down, covering everything. The locals celebrate the occasion as it injects more microplastics into the economy, making their life better off, but there's this unease that you as the player feel, knowing that all this pollution is going to wreak havoc on the ecosystem. This tension eats at you as you watch the locals dance in the streets as trash rains down on them, a kind of dramatic irony as you know more than they do. In an interview with Game Rant, Pollock describes how the game takes the player's understanding of the destruction that pollution causes as a given, and instead leverages that to create a cathartic mirroring of our climate crisis in the real world. This is very much a game about not just climate change, but climate catastrophe. That's what's shown to be going on in the underwater world here. I think a lot of people in general, especially people growing up right now, have this sense of the crumbling world right now. Sharing how we feel about that, or helping people find catharsis and what that feels like, was always much more important to me than, oh hey, the moral is pollution is bad. That's taken as a given in this game's storyline. What do we do from here is more of the open question. The game's environmentalism also points to one of the causes clearly: capitalism. The game is decidedly anti-capitalist, or should I say crabitalist. Two major villains, one that was deceptively positioned as the last boss, and the actual last boss, are caricatures of capitalists and their personal greed. The entire event that started Krill's adventure is Pronathan taking a shell, forcing him into a system he had no say in. The solution to all these problems isn't to be compliant, as doing this just messes Krill around for the duration of the game. The actual solution is to take charge and be the instigator of violence in the face of injustice. This is to be expected given Aggro Crab's previous game, Going Under, a game about the evils of unpaid internship and the soulless corporations that try to fool people into thinking the brand is their friend. They wear their sensibilities on their sleeve. The game feels like an indie game. This is both good because you can feel real heart and soul put into it, and there's charm oozing around the game, but it can also be bad. There's some odd bugs, not usually game-breaking, but noticeable, and they're pretty big frame drops when entering some areas. It sorts itself out quickly enough, but I played on PS5, so I didn't expect any performance drops. But, like the hip-hop industry after 1997, it's no biggie, as when this happens, there's rarely any enemies around. This game is difficult, by the way, more difficult than a lot of Souls-likes I've played, though I feel it does a better job and feels far more fair than Shadow of the Erdtree does, which is why I deeply enjoyed my time with this game. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, don't be shellfish, consider pinching that subscribe button to stay current with the channel. I'll be scuttling back with some new content soon, keep your claws sharp, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, my loggers.